You may have seen the viral video of the British woman arrested last year for praying silently. Silently. Her lips weren't even moving. Outside of an abortion clinic. She was actually one of two British Christians on trial for the thought crime of silent prayer. She was acquitted, but then this week she was arrested again. Well, these arrests led to an effort in the UK House of Commons to allow for silent prayer in abortion clinic buffer zones, but that was rejected today, essentially giving the green light for police to take actions against thought crimes, people who look like they're praying. You know what this tells me? Really, in all seriousness, it tells me that those who are advancing abortion in this culture of death are afraid of prayer. It really does. And it should remind us of how powerful prayer really is. If the enemy is this concerned about people praying, we need to do a whole lot more about it. All right, joining me now to discuss this is Peter McIlvenna. He is the co-founder of Hearts of Oak, a freedom of speech alliance. He works in the office of the UK's House of Lords. Peter, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Tony. It's always wonderful to join you. Thank you.
Well, tell our viewers and our listeners the latest on this story and fill in any pieces I left out.
Well, for a couple of years, this piece of legislation has been pushed, and a number of MPs, including sadly my MP, my personal MP, have tried to push this through under the guise of protecting women as they go and take the life of their child. And this has now been put on as an amendment. You mentioned a couple of cases of individuals arrested for being outside and praying. But putting that aside one moment, we had them arrested, and that was under previous legislation that the government were choosing to use, but they wanted a new piece of legislation, despite the fact that the government said, the Conservatives said, 5 years ago, they reviewed this and said there was no need for so-called buffer zones. This has now been passing through the Commons and the Lords, and where we are up to today is that amendment that would have given protection to prayer. I can't believe I'm even saying those words, protection to prayer. That was defeated by, I think, 116 votes to 299, something like that. So it meant that those who are outside an abortion clinic within a buffer zone of 150 meters, if you're doing anything which would impede that happening, and that is now defined as prayer, as silent prayer, that means you have broken the law and you can be arrested. And that law will now be on our statute books in the UK across the country.
Peter, what's driving this? Is there that much religious hostility in the UK now that silent prayer is illegal, or is it just an inexplicable alignment with the culture of death and abortion?
Well, it's a strange quirk that this has got caught up in this, and I think possibly it's badly written legislation, which happens often. You write a piece of legislation, a bill, a law, and it's used for something different than its intended purpose. I think this is maybe a fault of that. The issue is the desperation of the left at making abortion happen as much as possible. When those in our legislative chamber desire death more than they do life, and it's not just at the beginning of life with babies, it's also euthanasia at the end of life, and really pushing anywhere in between. And this really follows what's happening in Europe. In Belgium, they've got a law that anyone can be euthanized. Whether that is a teenager who feels depressed that day, they can go and they can end their life. There doesn't seem to be any understanding of the importance of life, and that's where I think our Christian understanding comes into this, because everyone has intrinsic value, because we are all made in the image of God. And if you're not a believer, if you're not a Christian, then you don't understand that all life has value, and therefore the life of the mother and the maybe the economical difficulty that she may have, and the difficult circumstances she may be in, that actually takes precedence over the life of the second individual, which right. is her baby. So I think it's a desperation for abortion, but obviously it's a weak church that doesn't speak up against this.
Now, there is obviously a significant difference in the UK versus the United States in that we have a First Amendment right to speech and religious freedom, although it's being challenged here in our country as well. But I'm still I'm having a hard time coming to understand why silent prayer. It's not like they're there shouting prayer, not like they're preaching on the streets. Just, I watched the video. I mean, a woman just standing there. You would just think that she's waiting for the bus. But she was honest. She was asked by the police, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm praying." "Oh, I'm going to have to arrest you because that's illegal." This is, I wonder how the people there, the citizens of the United Kingdom, are responding to this.
There's probably a lackluster response. It takes a lot to get the British angry, and I don't think this yet has passed the threshold. Why on earth? That's a whole other conversation. But there is very little, even today when this story came out, or very little written about it, very little on the side. In fact, most of the press was, "This is wonderful. This legislation that would have stopped abortion has been defeated." And it's all about women have the right to abort, and it is nothing about the other person within that, who is the child, and their rights. There is very little vocal opposition. There are some groups, Christian lobby groups, that are opposing it. Christian Concern are wonderful. Christian Legal Centre are wonderful. CARE. Those are, to me, the three Christian lobby organisations. You've got some MPs who are opposing this, but they are in the minority. But this is part of the slippery slope that we find ourselves in the UK. When there's no such thing as truth, when there's no such thing as right and wrong, then anything goes.
So maybe if they wanted to get the populace involved, they should have added an amendment to the T, so it would ban silent prayer and tea. Maybe then the British would get a little upset. So I'm going to go back to what you said a moment ago, that the church has been pretty much silent on this. Is this the result of a spiritually emasculated church that is just no longer engaged and has sold the truth, for a few pieces of silver?
Yes, so there are a couple of things. One is, I think the church have lost their voice and are more worried about how they will appear in the news and the media and their newspaper.
So they're more concerned about their reputation and their standing in the broader culture than they are standing for truth.
And they've forgotten the fact that they will stand face to face before God and give an account of what they do. And as leaders, they will be judged more harshly. And they've completely ignored that and forgotten about that and looked at probably celebrity status or how they're viewed in the media. That's the most important thing. So there has been silence. I'll give a story of one church I was in, and they had someone preaching about do not murder, going through the 10 Commandments. And they were talking about, well, actually, murder does mean abortion. And they took 5 minutes to discuss that and put that out. And the next week, the church stood up and they didn't apologize. They said that it was very difficult and there were two sides to every story and we must be careful of what we say. And it was putting distance between them and what the Bible says is do not murder.
Wow. Amazing. Peter, we're up against the end of the program, but I got to ask you this question. You come to the United States a fair amount. You're back and forth. What is your message to the churches in America, given what you see unfolding in the UK?
Well, I see a confidence and boldness in the churches in America, and you may not maybe see that as much within it, but certainly when you look at the weakness across Europe and across the UK, and I would certainly ask for the prayers of your viewers for Europe, for the UK, that we will have a bold church, a strong church that will stand up and will hold on to these issues. And secondly, with our politicians, that we will have strong politicians. Just back from CPAC, and whatever you may think, there was boldness and people knew what issues they believed in. We lack that in the UK and we need that.
Peter, always great to see you. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks, Tony.